Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Sober and Wellness Podcast. I am Abigail Padro, your host. And in today's episode, I have Priscilla Gutierrez with us. And I'm super excited to have her here because one, she was one of the coaches that was in Reframe when I started. So she's dear to my heart. And second of all, it's because she's been in this journey of sobriety for a very long time. She will get into that as well. And she's also a trauma coach. So I love to hear out her perspective and how she has navigated this journey, being sober and dealing with hard stuff that we all have to deal with. So with any further ado, here's Priscilla, and welcome, Priscilla. How are you?
Thank you very much. I'm doing great. It's been a little bit of a long day, but I couldn't think of a better way to start my evening than with you and someone that I've come to know for, I want to say 2 years, around 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah, and so you've been a part of my journey as well. Definitely when I was just starting out as a coach and getting my reps in, we were able to meet in, I believe, Lakeland
Mm-hmm.
and, and spend time together. So it's truly an honor to also just see you and witness your growth and your transformation. So I am a trauma recovery coach. At this point, I have pivoted more to mindset. So it's all connected. I realized in working with trauma survivors the mindset, which is the beliefs that you have about yourself or other people and the world, and how those beliefs impact your decision making, your relationships. And so that's why I've changed my platform to really just kind of expand it to mindset generally. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you'd like me to expand on. Did you want me to talk about kind of my own journey with alcohol?
First of all, I love everything that you said. But yeah, we can start with your journey, just how long you being sober, what made you start in sobriety, and how all this unpacked and unfolded that now you are doing what you're doing as a coach.
Yeah, for sure. My date of last alcohol, one of those nights was November 1st, 2011. So it's been quite some time. I stopped drinking when I was 20 years old, so never actually legally drank. And you might be wondering, those listening, why would a junior in college that, a lot of people glamorize college and that age group to be, the height of partying, why would she choose to stop drinking after already having consumed alcohol for several years? And that's kind of a lot to unpack. It definitely was not a one time attempt or an in the moment decision. It was maybe a couple of months in the making, at least in the making, in terms of trying, of going to AA meetings, of going to substance abuse support groups on my campus, of going to rehab, of going to therapy, of trying to cut back, of saying, okay, I'll just kind of dabble and not drink for a little bit and then going back to drinking. So it definitely was a journey. And I didn't even grow up in a household where there was alcohol because of my grandfathers. So on my mom's side, she's from Ecuador, and she grew up, her actual childhood home doubled as a bar. So she grew up with a lot of drunk individuals throwing up on themselves, peeing on themselves, being very just all over the place. And that really turned her off to alcohol. And apart from that, her own father was someone who had alcohol use disorder. And so between those two things, she has never been drunk. Like it just never was her thing. And then on my dad's side, kind of similar. His father also abused alcohol, and he kind of saw his father as like a template of what he doesn't want to be like. And so he also has never been like drunk. And yeah, so that just wasn't in our household. So it's like, okay, so what happened with this one, me, and also my brother, who also unfortunately went down a dark path with drugs. And so, my answer to that is really unresolved trauma, both generational trauma and individual trauma. So, on both sides of my family, they experienced a lot of trauma in their childhood, in their families. So, a lot of unresolved mental illness, untreated mental illness, unresolved pain. On my dad's side, thinking of what's going on right now in Los Angeles, these protests and ICE, I see my father, I see my uncles, I see other members of my family that were refugees and had to flee Nicaragua. So he had to flee literal warfare, violence, being shot at, really horrific things. And so you can imagine how that affected a young boy. And so when you kind of bring those two people together that, not by choice, but lack of resources, lack of awareness, weren't able to really get the support that they needed and came from broken homes, etc. Those things don't disappear. They don't just, resolve themselves. So those traumas definitely affected how they viewed the world and their mindsets, and then how they parented us and things like that. And so that's the generational trauma component. As far as the individual trauma, that was very influential on my coping skill choices, including alcohol. The same grandfather that I mentioned previously, my mother's father, he molested me when I was a little girl. And that was super confusing and life changing. And so that was a trauma that really led to a lot of pain and anger and confusion and not feeling heard, not feeling special, not feeling protected, all these different things. And then you add to that other traumas that I experienced in childhood and then traumas in adolescence. And so by the time I went to college, I really came with a lot of baggage of unresolved things that I never really took the time to sit with. I had actually gone to a therapist, maybe by senior years when I started seeing a therapist, but that was like a little band-aid. There was too much to unpack. And so I did drink before I went to college. I definitely would justify things in my mind. So I was allowed to drink with family members. And so I kind of rationalized that as, well, I mean, yeah, I'm underage and, probably I don't recommend this for teenagers to consume alcohol, but I'm with my family. We're at a wedding, we're having dinner. And when I say family, I mean like my relatives. And so I kind of justified it that way. I didn't drink with friends, not because there wasn't alcohol around, but because that was like my boundary. It made me feel better. But getting drunk is getting drunk, no matter if it's with family or friends. And so by the time I went to college, I actually went there with the intention not to drink at all. Because my brother, as I was checking into college in the summer of 2009, he was checking into his first rehab. And so, like, the same time. And so I went to like his orientation and, just more trauma, more things I saw because I can see it from both sides, being someone who has abused alcohol and then also being the loved one of someone with addiction. So both sides of that coin are very traumatic and intense. And so at that point, I'd seen a lot of things with my brother and going to drop him off at the rehab. I was like, I don't want to go down that path. I'm not going to drink. I remember telling the lady there, like, I'm not going to drink. But that didn't last. So, probably, I want to say maybe October, I gave into drinking. And for me, it was always binge drinking. I never took tally of how many drinks. I never set a limit intentionally because that's another way of justifying it. Well, I don't really know how much I'm drinking, so I can't really tell you. But my body will tell me that you're overdoing it by blacking out, by being belligerent, by falling, all these different things. And so that continued and progressed into, freshman year, sophomore year, and then the first half of junior year. And so throughout those times, definitely questionable decision making, putting myself in dangerous situations, being very impulsive, just being very dysregulated. And so I did go to a wilderness program after my freshman year of college. Long story short, my parents recommended it. My brother was already in one. So I went, and that's not a drug and alcohol rehabilitation program. But once I completed it, they give you aftercare suggestions. And so they suggested that I go to a outpatient rehab for alcohol to explore my relationship. And so I went and I didn't complete it. I was 19. I want to say I was there for like 2 weeks. They do the urinalysis, you got to pee in a cup, you got to do the group therapy, all these different things. So I was really in the program, but I want to go back to school. School is starting again, and I didn't see it as necessary. It was just too much at 19, even though professionals were telling me that I needed to do the program. So I quit the program, went back. So, like I said, sophomore year, and then the first half of junior year, I actually stopped drinking, like I said, November 2nd, 2011. So, my last night of drinking was a Halloween party, and binge drinking, just straight up binge drinking, and very questionable decisions. And that was a scary night for me because I came very close to being violated. And I was so upset with myself that I'm like, how, because of my trauma, sexual abuse trauma, I already had a lot of anxiety around men and things like that. And so I really disappointed myself. Why did you make yourself so vulnerable? And to be clear, sexual assault is always the fault of the perpetrator, but just at this age, I definitely didn't know that. I definitely internalized a lot of victim blaming. And I just felt like I made it so easy for this person. Thankfully, it didn't progress to what it could have progressed, but it was very close. And I did end up blacking out that night. But thankfully, once I got into the car, I'll leave some details out. But basically, I'm really thankful that things didn't go how they really could have gone. And so after that particular night, I told myself, I'm taking a break. I'm taking a long break. I didn't say I was never going to drink. I just knew that I needed to take a break because that scared me. And so that was November. And then, unfortunately, in January, so not too long afterward, my brother was found unresponsive. And so he was rushed to the ICU. He wasn't supposed to make it that night. He wasn't supposed to make it the next night. He was dying. And so I saw him on his deathbed, the most traumatic thing I've ever been through. And there's so many layers to it, but a kind of condensed version is he had an anoxic brain injury. And so that is when the brain is deprived of oxygen. We die in a matter of minutes if our brain doesn't get oxygen. And so it's the worst injury anyone can get because the brain affects everything. So it wasn't, sometimes people think traumatic brain injury, which any traumatic brain injury, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Sometimes it's a car accident and they think, okay, it's just like one part of the brain. And then what part of the brain that typically controls, what that controls. But with an anoxic brain injury, it's diffused. So there is no one part. It's all over in spots. And so that was a whole journey. And definitely after seeing him in such a delicate state, hanging on by a thread to life, I remember thinking that that could have been me in that bed with the tubes and everything that I saw. And I knew that to be true because of some of the situations I was putting myself into. So I went to school in Baltimore City, and shout out Baltimore. I have a lot of love for that city. But yeah, there's some parts that are high crime, and part of my self-destructive nature was to go into those areas for no reason other than just to be self-destructive, basically, and to drink. And so, suffice it to say, that was absolutely a turning point for me. I still hadn't committed to never drinking, but honestly, that wasn't even on my radar of what's my relationship with alcohol. It's like, I need to make sure my brother survives. And then once he didn't die those, first week, It's like, okay, now he's still in a coma. And when you're in a coma, it's not, okay, well, count down, he's gonna wake up in like 10 days. There is no wake up date. There is no anything. We were told that he would have a 0% chance of recovering. And then we fought for him. My parents primarily advocated for him, like, we're not pulling the plug. You got to give him all the medicines, and we're going to transfer him to, of all places, Johns Hopkins, which is a top hospital and also the school I went to. Because originally he was at another hospital. And so once they ran other tests at Johns Hopkins, the doctor said, okay, he has a 20% chance of waking up. Again, we don't know what waking up means. It doesn't mean he's going to be completely who he was. But that 20% literally felt like winning the lottery. Like, oh shit, like 0% to 20, I'll take it. Like, we're going to hold on to that for life. And so, again, we advocated, we, we went against a lot of disbelief, a lot of pessimism. And so ultimately, about 6 months later, he did wake up from his coma against all odds. And I was going to school like anything, like nothing happened, which looking back, I'm like, on one hand, I'm like, okay, maybe that was me coping because I had something to focus on. And on the other hand, I'm like, oh my God, I would never do that. I don't ever want to even imagine being in a position where I had to do that again because that is absolutely mind boggling. I remember being in class and texting with family, and I remember my parents saying, Yvonne moved his thumb, like kind of on command. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm in class praying and trying to learn and study for exams, and it was insane. And so once he was in like the coma, emerging from the coma, I was like, okay, things are looking a little better. And his emergence was very, very gradual, very, very slow. So once I started to kind of emerge a little bit, I'm like, okay, I guess now it's safe to maybe go hang out with friends or just like focus on something else. And so I do recall maybe at the 7 month mark of being sober, actually wanting to drink again. And I was at a party. And so I could have drank that night. Thankfully, the friend that I was with at the time, she was like, I mean, you've done it this long. Like, you should probably
Mm-hmm.
just with the sobriety. And that was really helpful in that moment for me to kind of think about it like, yeah, I don't want to go back to alcohol. Why am I even considering this? So that was probably the last time I ever felt the urge to drink, like actually like I'm gonna drink. After I made it through that hurdle, I was like, you know what? I don't want to go backwards. I'm gonna stick to this sobriety. And I never went back. I never went back to alcohol. Me personally, I never did other drugs, which a lot of people find surprising. But again, I know me and how I justify things. And so I can't have an issue with substances if it's only alcohol because alcohol is legal and alcohol is everywhere and things like that. But yeah, I stayed strong in that sense to not dabble into other things that were readily available. And so, one thing I do want to mention, because some people listening might be like, oh, well, it sounds like she just kind of, yeah, she struggled a bit, but she kind of just made a decision. What I do want to add to that is that, yes, I was sober, but I wasn't really all the way in recovery because I was active in an eating disorder that I developed. And so that eating disorder developed, there were already kind of seeds planted because of bullying that I experienced from peers and from family members about my weight, about my body. It was just torn apart. And so I can look back and see little glimpses of like, okay, I can recall in high school, for example, like, oh, I ate Taco Bell. Now I need to get on the treadmill for 90 minutes type things. But that didn't really last long. But the seeds were there. And so once everything happened with my brother, on top of school, on top of everything, drama with people at school, nothing stopped because my brother was dying. Things go on, and so it was a lot to juggle. So I ultimately developed an eating disorder, and it certainly wasn't a decision. It just gradually got worse and worse. And so that was my crutch for a very long time. Well into law school, after law school, it was definitely something I wasn't educated on really before developing one. But for those who aren't familiar, at least in my experience and what I've heard other people say, it's not about the food. It's about control. It's about perfectionism, trauma, you know, low self-esteem. It's very intense. It's very rigid and black and white. And so I just wanted to highlight that often, with some people, when you stop one thing, you pick up something else. And so for me, once I stopped drinking, I picked up eating disorders, that showed up in different ways. But for that eating disorder, I did go to rehab as well. So I did a 10-week program, intensive outpatient. That was a lot. It was a whole world when it comes to eating disorders. I was in rooms with women that had lost pregnancies, had lost relationships, had to drop out of school. It's like in my opinion, it's like similar to a substance addiction where it really can destroy your life in so many ways. And so that was really hard. But how did I get to this point where now I'm a life coach and I'm a speaker? Well, as I mentioned, I did go to law school. Again, I don't know how I did that because law school is very intense. And so that was the first time, honestly, I was academically challenged, like really challenged in my life. And I did it. I performed well, did what I was supposed to do, which I was very keen on doing growing up. But after I finished and I earned my JD, then you take the bar exam. And so, for those who don't know, the bar exam is the licensing exam, and it is no exaggeration, 3 months straight of studying nonstop for one exam. I'm not sure what the current format is, but I believe when I was going to take it, it was going to be 2 days. And prior to that, it was a 3-day exam. So it's extremely intense. And I did start studying for it. And as I'm sitting there, going to the barbery classes and taking exams, I'm like, why am I still doing this? Even in law school, I was like completely going through the motions. And I thought maybe this is the imposter syndrome. But no, it's really because I didn't want like I didn't want to be there. It wasn't in alignment. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, my brother's injury was junior year. I graduate senior year. I did take a gap year and I got treatment for my eating disorder. And then I went to law school. I went to law school probably 6 months after I finished, the last day of my treatment. So I was completely not in tune with myself, with my body. I wanted an escape also. I wanted an escape from dealing with the reality of what happened to my brother and what that looked like because his injury, there's so many chapters to it. It wasn't just the ICU, it's been a whole lot of things. And so that was extremely stressful. So school was an escape for me, just like it was in college. You know, I remember studying at the hospital. I remember balancing just so much with what was going on, and I did that in law school. And so once kind of I got that degree, it's like I just finally allowed myself to be more honest and say, like, I did it. I always knew since I was a little girl I was going to go to top schools, I was going to go to graduate school, and I finally did it. And I felt like, okay, I'm done. I'm not going to another graduate school. I'm done being a student. I did what I said I would do. I felt like I validated my parents' sacrifices. But now what? Like, I don't want to be an attorney. And even throughout law school, people would ask me, and I'm like, I think, maybe an entertainment lawyer, maybe, I'll get into HR or I'll do something like a JD adjacent type job because I really didn't know. I was a young adult. And for those wondering, like, well, that's a pretty expensive, experiment. I got a scholarship. And so that definitely helped. And I'm thankful for that scholarship. And so, long story short, I made the courageous decision not to take the bar, not to pursue being an attorney. After I made that decision, I did look at like corporate jobs, and even those felt very unnatural. Mind you, social media has been around for a long time at this now, but back in like 2017, it's not how it is today, where people are more open to non-traditional paths. So growing up, I I knew I had to get a secure, prestigious job, like an attorney, like my father's. And it didn't even occur to me that I had like really other options, such as entrepreneurship, such as being an advocate and a speaker. I didn't have anyone that I can point to in my family and be like, oh, they're a public speaker or they're a life coach. Definitely not approved or understood by a lot of people in my family. But I knew since I was a little girl, like, I'm destined for something not normal, not average. I just don't know what that is. So I'm proud of myself for making that really brave decision to say, I'm blessed for all the education I got. I gave it my all, but this is not something I want to invest in further. And I do not want to practice law. And so I did go through kind of some years of trying to figure out, well, now what? And so I did different jobs. I worked in nonprofit industry. I did work at a law firm, etc. When I was working for maybe the law firm, I remember seeing on social media this woman talk about being a trauma recovery coach. And I had no idea what that was. Never heard of that. I've only been involved with therapists and licensed mental health professionals. But the more I read about the work she does and the certification program that she mentioned, looked into it. I'm like, this is a match for me. This is in alignment with me. I don't want to be a clinician. I don't want to treat people. I just want to offer that peer support that I needed growing up. I just want to use my expertise through lived experience and my ability to connect with people in a positive way that's fulfilling. And so I did undergo that certification program. I earned my certification, and then I just started building up my clientele. As far as speaking, I started with NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. It's a huge grassroots organization in the country, and I started speaking for them. And so that was back in Michigan. I would go into high schools, community centers, and I would share parts of my story. And I would share, the statistics and all that. And I felt very much at home in that role of using my voice, of speaking from the heart, of connecting with people. I loved when the students will come afterward and share one-on-one. And so from there, I just started networking. Eventually, I joined a speaking agency. I was signed, and I'm still with them. And one of the most exciting moments was actually back in April of this year. I went back to Johns Hopkins, my school, for the first time since I graduated. And it was so wild because out of all places that I spoke and was invited to speak, it was in the building that I used to live in, where I was definitely wilding out. And that building was next to another building that I used to live in and where I used to work. It was like the epicenter of a lot of very questionable memories. And I'm like, oh, God wants me to be here and He wants me to see your
Circle
back.
back.
Yeah, literal full circle moment. And I was nervous. I was scared. I was more nervous about being back on campus and because Johns Hopkins has campuses across the city, but out of all places, it's like literally where I used to hang out at and be at. And it was right there that I had to go speak. And it was a really beautiful moment for myself to show myself how far I've come and that my narrative, I don't have to hold on to that anymore. For a long time, it had a lot of shame, a lot of weight on me. But once I started, probably in like 2018, sharing parts of myself with family, writing essays online, and just gradually sharing more and more, that's been key to my recovery from eating disorder and drinking and my mental health generally. I have different diagnoses. It has been community. And so, for those listening, whatever journey you're on or where you're at in your journey, I do encourage you to find your community, build your community. Like, Abigail and myself, we met through an app, and that was a community. And so I feel like I kind of gave a pretty good summary of what my journey has been like, but I'm happy to expand on anything else.
Wow, that was a lot of good information. There's a lot to unpack here. First of all, I mean, wow, what a story. Very inspiring to say the least, to go through all that. There's a lot of stuff there that's like really deep trauma, things that sometimes it can happen to the best of us. We might not be able to even get out of it. And the fact that you did it in such young age, because that's, you're like a unicorn, like it's not a normal thing that a 20-year-old does this kind of stuff. I know things have changed a little bit and this generation is starting. There's the movement of being sober curious, which I think it's amazing for just humanity. But the fact that you did it in a place that when we were that age, it just alcohol was at its prime, I believe. One thing that I've seen a lot in our community where we met, there's a lot of abuse, especially with women, sexual abuse,
Yeah.
and it's unfortunately, I mean, and I think now it's becoming, there's more awareness, but before, it's like you say, it was something that I think it was like hidden, or you felt guilty, or people didn't do nothing about it at the end. And I want to say I'm sorry to the little girl that you were, because honestly, that really, it does get me like upset in the sense of why there has to be that kind of stuff in the world, right? It's just, I have a little girl and she's 7 years old. I was never like fully to that extent, but I did have, a situation that I encountered was not full blown, but I was little too. And I had one of my uncles. And I think this is the first time I have said it. And he was not my real uncle. And the reason I'm saying it is because we do have to bring awareness and we have to be vulnerable. Thank God that it did not get there. But just the beginning of it, like, when you're a little girl, and then you're like, there's something off. And the thing is that as you grow up, I think it takes your innocence away in a way, even though it didn't get there. And I remember that my aunt got sick. Then he got sick and he died. Can you believe I was happy that he died?
I believe it.
As a little girl that you really don't know you're good or bad. And I think now going back, it was a sense of relief because I knew there was danger there. I couldn't completely understand, but there was danger. And the thing is that we don't understand and you're so confused. Like it's either it's a bad thing, it's horrible. So that's why I can, touch my heart every time I hear somebody because I know how it can feel. And with my daughter, I'm always 100% trust. You know what I mean? Because you just never know. And sometimes it happens to be the people closest to you. It is the people within your, unfortunately, that's how it is. People that have access. It's hard for a person outside to have access to the little girl. So I just wanted to touch on that. And also the generational trauma. I loved how you explain it because I think a lot of us don't understand what that means and how much awareness you have around that. It's really amazing because I think that that's like the beginning of starting your foundation and working towards healing because we have to understand what happened. Like I know there's a lot of studies that have shown that DNA trauma does, transfer, and I don't think we are aware of that. And it's crazy that, but the fact that you have it and you're being able to work on it, it's also something that it's really good. And I'm glad that you're talking about it and that you are very loud about it because it's not talked about enough. So you're doing a great service to the community, especially in the mental health area. and putting this awareness in that, and so we can all go back and say, okay, let me just study myself and my family to see where things are going. I wanted to ask you,
Hmm.
for your brother, when he went through all that situation, that happened because he was drinking or drugs, or it was something unrelated? I didn't get that part.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. And I also want to touch on what you shared. Thank you for sharing about what you experienced. And whatever happened, it's valid. It's absolutely valid. One thing I learned in my healing journey is sometimes there's a lot of misinformation around sexual assault generally, of like what counts as assaults or things like that. And so, whatever you experience is just as valid as anyone else's because it's how you felt about it. And so I can definitely relate, not saying I know exactly how you feel, but I can relate to that description of, it didn't get as far as it could have went because that's how I felt with my grandfather, where, two times someone walked in and like interrupted basically. But that anxiety lives in you of damn, like what if? Or, for me, I really struggled with being frozen in the moment. Like, oh my gosh, he could have just done whatever he wanted. I was frozen. And so I just wanted to advocate for little Abigail and let her know that her experience is absolutely valid. And also the part about being happy about your uncle, I relate to that. That's how I felt, my one of my traumas that I hadn't mentioned was the same grandfather. He almost died in front of me because he fell down the stairs, cement stairs outside. He just tripped, and I was right behind him. I saw the whole thing, and he fell straight onto the pavement, and he's not moving. There was blood. I don't know what the hell happened to him. So that was very scary. But I share that to say that I remember as he was recuperating in our house, and I was helping to take care of him, thinking, not being able to sleep, because his the guest bedroom was right next to my bedroom. So couldn't really sleep. And I remember thinking, when he dies, I'm not going to be sad. I'm only going to be sad because my mommy's going to be sad. But I really don't care if he dies. So, and I remember thinking, like, as an adult looking back, like, damn, like that's
Hmm.
so sad that a little girl was already desensitized to that. So I definitely hear you with that. I also want to echo that you're absolutely right that statistically, like 90 something percent of perpetrators of childhood sexual abuse are a trusted adult, family member, neighbor, coach, teacher. And so it's unfortunately, like you said, often not dealt with properly. So even in my own family, I did confide in an elder and they didn't do anything about it. I came to find out more about the family's legacy of sexual abuse. And I kind of, at this point in my life, it doesn't excuse the lack of validation or action or lack of action, but I have more understanding as to why some of my elders didn't protect me because that grandfather, he was actually removed from my aunt's house by CBS because he molested another cousin. My aunt never told my mom. And so he came when he was kicked out of LA in that house, he came to our apartment in a different part of California. And you would think, at least give a heads up.
Yeah.
So I know that very well, where sometimes you're like, wow, like this is like a cover-up operation. But I just wanted to honor that. And also, I wanted to share a resource you had mentioned as far as epigenetics, how your DNA, the way I'm not a neuroscientist and all
Hmm.
that. But the book, It Didn't Start With You, I believe by Mark Wallen, is a great resource to learn more about how that works on a cellular level. And then as far as my brother, so that remains, I really don't have an answer for that because when he was taken into the ICU and they did all types of tests, they didn't find drugs in his system. I don't know if they found alcohol, but I know they didn't find drugs. Now, I've talked to other, doctors, and I remember one said, because this was back in January 2012, where fentanyl wasn't well known or wasn't the epidemic that it is today. And that doesn't show up on traditional drug tests. So I don't know what type of drug test they ran and if it could pick up, other substances that may or may have not been. I don't know. All I know is he was found unresponsive by his girlfriend. He just, yeah, was not responding to anything she was doing to try and wake him up. I believe he was drinking that weekend because of texts that I got from him that weekend. And he did have, I believe, pneumonia. And so his lungs collapsed, his organs were failing. So what the doctor concluded was undetermined. So they literally didn't give us a direct response. But what they speculate is walking pneumonia plus very poor health maintenance. He wasn't sleeping right, he wasn't eating right, he was drinking, he was doing whatever else. And so I know during this time period he was abusing prescription pills. A lot of those have side effects. So honestly, I see what happened to him as a miracle. The last time I saw him before his injury, I was angry at him. I was so angry at him. I refused to say bye to him. I said a lot of things that I'll never say again. But I remember in the car ride to be dropped off at college, my dad started praying and just randomly started praying out loud with me and just begging God to intervene. We don't know what to do with Yvonne. He went to at least 7 rehabs, getting kicked out, homeless, all bunch of things. And then this happened. So sometimes when you ask for something, it may not look how you think it's gonna, because he is sober now. He is sober.
Mm-hmm.
I know where he's at. I don't have to be worried. Is he alive? Where is he? He's delivered from so much darkness that he was going through during this time. And yeah, so it looked like a brain injury, and just everything that happened. Our priests at the time even recognized it as a miracle. The attending doctor, when he first got in, said that this was the worst MRI he's ever seen in his entire career. Like, it was a horrific anoxic injury. There is no explanation why my brother can even speak, let alone talk in English and Spanish, has the same humor, has his memories, he has a part-time job right now, he volunteers at the hospital. He's still on his journey. It's not like, everything is peaches and cream. He's still working towards walking independently. He can take steps with a walker. He does personal training and things like that. And so I think the fact that there is no clear answer, to me, further supports that this is an act of God. It's not supposed to make sense because it doesn't. He shouldn't be alive.
Wow, that is powerful. I mean, I love what you said about the power of prayer and how sometimes when we ask God for something, we don't understand, right? At the moment, I imagine your dad had to feel like God just abandoned me. You're doing completely the opposite. But sometimes he works a mysterious way, and I believe in God. So I do believe that sometimes he needs to do whatever he needs to do, and it will happen. But at the end, look, yes, it might not look like the way that he wanted it or you wanted it, but he's here, he's healthy, and he's a miracle. I was saying in one of the last episode, I don't know which one it was, but I said, I truly believe that God still does miracle. That's not 2,000 years ago. That's still here. And he is a miracle. Sometimes when a doctor cannot give you an
Yeah.
answer, and trust me, they look for that answer. They will look and look and look. When they can't, and sometimes they have to use the word miracle. And I know they don't like it unless they're faith oriented.
Hmm.
But that's exactly, I believe in my heart, that your brother is a miracle and it's a testimony. And not understanding, sometimes we all have to understand that alcohol, drugs, it is a substance. It's a toxin that we are actually consuming and putting in our whole body and our organs. It goes all the way to your brain. It does damage your gray matter, and it does so many things. But we still here doing it. But I think the more awareness that comes out, people will start understanding the reality of it. Also, I wanted to touch on something that you said, 6 months of fighting for him in the hospital. It touched me when you said that because, as you know, my dad passed in December. And I truly understand it's not that I'm mocking hospital, but unfortunately, the way the system works, because it's a system, it's our healthcare system, right? I really believe sometimes, since they are in that environment all the time, they become desensitized, including there's a few that don't, that just that's their calling, like God just put them there because we need those kind of people. But some of them, whether it is because of their mental health or whatever, they're so unattached, which I understand. You cannot get attached with everybody. But I literally had to fight for my dad because if not, by the third day, they wanted him to go to the hospital and die.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that you guys as a family, I just want to acknowledge that, because 6 months of fighting, and not because I imagine they had to tell you to plug the plug, that he's not, I know exactly how that talk goes. And they're so cold about it. They're like, hey, there's nothing else we can do. Like, and they start pushing hospice and they start doing all these things. And he's just lucky that he has you guys as a family, because maybe somebody else hearing all this and there might not be that strong to deal with it. They just let it go. And he's here. So I think the miracle's both ways. You guys were amazing fighting for him, and he fought for himself. And God, I think it's just a beautiful testimony about your brother. And also what got to mind was when you said, you trigger that you were 7 months sober, and how important it is to have the good friends around you. Because let's go back and let's change the scenario. And then you had this one friend that did not like your sobriety, that wants you to drink. Imagine that. Maybe your story right now would not be the one you're telling us here. Maybe you be a lawyer now, being that you didn't have that awareness. And because alcohol takes your awareness away. Really, that's what it did for me. It takes your dedication, it takes your commitment, it takes your focus, it takes your identity away, in a way, your whole identity. So, and also what I wanted to touch that it was important is what you were talking about, transfer addiction. And how in your case, I think it's very interesting, because I never heard it like that. I've heard of like, okay, you going into weed now. I heard people going into other sorts of stuff, sugar being the number one that people struggle with. But I've never heard that one. And it's really interesting how you can go from that to then having an eating disorder. And I imagine that your thoughts was like, well, I should go back to drinking because then I was eating right. Did that happen to you when that was going on?
No, I never, when I was actively with an eating disorder, at that point I'm like, I'm not going to drink again. But that in itself, honestly, it was a lot harder than the drinking for me, because with alcohol and drugs, you can feel in your addiction that you need it to survive, but you don't actually, humans don't need alcohol to survive. We need food though. And so I had to face everyday food multiple times a day. And I grew up with a big appetite, never been a picky eater, always loved to eat. I would have never thought that I would get an eating disorder. But it's like I remember thinking, it's like I forgot how to eat. Like I forgot how to have a meal and just sit down. It's very psychological, it's very twisted. And so I did not have the thought of going back or like kind of replacing it back. But I do recall, like in law school, not a super strong urge, but kind of a thought of like, fuck, like this is a lot. There's a lot going on right now. People that I'm surrounding, there's a lot of drinking in the legal world. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was surrounded by a lot of students that were, let's go to the pub, let's go this. So I'm like, it did cross, but I didn't act on it. I talked to my therapist about it. It was more of just a feeling of overwhelm, really. But yeah, absolutely. To touch on some things you said, may your father continue to rest in peace. I think it's beautiful that he had a daughter advocating. And so you get it. You get that family loyalty.
Mm-hmm.
Even culturally, we're really big on that. And I hear you loud and clear about the business aspect, where some people that we encountered were compassionate and kind and did talk about God. Some people were like not as tactful. And I have this very vivid memory, but I'm not even gonna go there. Where it's like, yeah, some people just they
Like a transaction, right?
yes, and it's like ludicrous. Like we're telling you the facts. There is no hope. What are you doing? Like we're delusional type things. But I'm okay with that because ultimately my brother's here and we didn't listen. And so I'm very much of the mindset of it's not over till it's over. God to me is the ultimate physician. He is the one. And I would see that in the hospitals. There would be patients that you're like, oh, they're about to be good. And then unfortunately they pass. And so you can't really predict. And then as far as, yes, definitely community is huge. So I'll say it, for anyone listening, be very intentional with who you keep around you. Not everyone is going to support your healing because it reminds them of the healing they're not doing. And you just got to be really careful with, who you keep around you.
I love that what you said, that some people you remind them of the healing that they're not doing. That is just powerful right there. That just one statement. If people can get that one out of like everything is being this episode has been good, your stories, it's really inspiring. It's that. It's just sometimes when you're starting this journey for people that are listening, that you have 14 years, basically, you're half of your life being sober, right? But for people that are starting, that might feel like, oh my God, I can't do this, or your friends are not being supportive. Don't think it's a personal thing or attack to yourself, to you. It's actually something you're reminding them of what they're not doing for themselves. And we just have to look at them with compassion instead of looking at us like, okay, it's about me, because it's really not about you. It's
Mm-mm.
about their issue, and you actually working to stay alcohol free, you will have impact on people in a positive way once you go through the little turmoils and all of that. So that was well said. I wanted to ask you, you touched on if that's okay about the mental health and that you had some diagnoses and stuff like that. I if you mind sharing a little bit about that, if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. Throughout the years, apart from the eating disorder and the substance use disorder, PTSD from, I mean, obviously, like, even I would say probably before I wasn't officially diagnosed, probably until the eating disorder treatment, so like 2013. But yes, definitely PTSD, borderline personality disorder, which is kind of a controversial diagnosis because some people will say, it's really just complex trauma. Other people have told me, well, it's really just bipolar, or everybody has their opinions.
Mm-hmm.
Borderline personality disorder is its own diagnosis. I'm not bipolar. I definitely am a complex trauma survivor. What that means is you need at least five of the nine criteria that they put in the DSM, which include things like unstable moods,
Mm-hmm.
unstable sense of self, difficulty maintaining relationships, propensity for self-harm or suicidality and
Mm-hmm.
suicide ideation. So I definitely checked those off and I was diagnosed with that back in 2018. I was also diagnosed with OCD around that time. And so, yeah, honestly, and I'm certainly not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but to me, a lot of it comes down to the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
You have unhealed trauma, and especially if it's chronic, like just my brother's injury alone, 6 months of not knowing if he's ever going to wake up is torture. And so that in itself dysregulated the hell out of me. But yeah, and then also I can also see genetics. So with OCD, I believe that's more genetic. Definitely runs in the family. And so that looks like for me, there's a lot of misconceptions around borderline and OCD and pretty much most mental health conditions. Some people think, oh, I'm very organized. I like to color code my notes. I'm so OCD. That literally has no correlation. It's typically rituals or intrusive thoughts. So for me, it's been the intrusive thoughts where you have this thought of There's kind of like different categories. For me, it's typically harm, like I caused someone harm and like you can't convince me otherwise type thing. And then also health related, like, oh, I have this disease type thing. And they're so consuming. To me, when I've had those kind of like episodes of intrusive thoughts, they're all consuming and just like I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Um, yeah, and then apart from that, I think that's pretty much it. Things like that.
I've been dealing with, I'm claustrophobic. So I don't know where that gets in the spectrum. I've always had it. A doctor told me that could be passed in your genes. I have not researched it, I didn't go into it. But I'm like, it has to be. My dad really had that, but my dad went to a trauma when he was younger. He was stuck. He was in a supermarket, and for whatever reason, he went to get leave something there. I don't know how he got inside of a big fridge, and the door closed, and he couldn't open it. But
Mm,
the thing is, the owner of the store was leaving, and he left.
oh my
And that's a
gosh.
fridge that is really, really cold. He would not come to the next day in the morning. That means my dad was gonna die there, stuck.
Oh my God.
Talking about miracles, and by the glory of God, the guy forgot something and went back and was able to take my dad out. So my dad went to the Korea War. So you can see how that could be part of it, a war, all that stuff that you go through. I imagine that had to also deal with that, had to contribute. But with that said, you can understand why he would be claustrophobic, right? Going on with life, he had a trauma, but I haven't. I have never been stuck anywhere, not even in an elevator or anything like that. So
Hmm.
what's been happening is that now it's not only being in a confined space because I take elevators, but I am so like OCD. I know how that elevator is going, how fast. Like if anything goes like abnormal, I know it. I'm like
Hmm.
hyper vigilant. Like oh my god, like I want them to open. I want to get out. That's one thing. But as I gotten older, now it's things like let's see if I wanted to do my lashes and I have to be there for 2 hours and I cannot open my eyes. That will produce that irrational fear because that's a phobia. It's an irrational fear. It's basically the left side of your brain. It's getting like it's going into the flight mode. So you
Hmm.
know the amount of cortisol that your body just releases when you have that because it's basically your brain is telling you that you're in danger.
Hmm.
And what I do is, I'm going to give you one example that happened this Sunday. I went to Disney World, to Animal Kingdom with the kids. I was having a great time. I love all sorts of roller coasters, all of them. I don't care. I've done skydiving. Like, I love that kind of stuff, right?
Hmm.
Well, guess what is my fear? My fear is not the hoops, everything else. It's getting stuck at the point that when you get down for what, or that the machine just gets stuck and I can't get out of there. So we got into the dinosaur ride,
Hmm.
and it's just a little cart. You put your seatbelt. That's it. You're open, but you have a seatbelt that you can't move out of that seat.
Hmm.
And we finished the ride. When I'm getting out, the car that is in front of me, they're getting off. So right? That it's common sense that I have to wait a couple of very few minutes while it's my turn to get out.
Hmm.
Right there. The fact that I couldn't get out now because I want to get out now, it's a control issue. So anytime I don't have control of a situation, especially of me, I get obsessive about it. But then I started feeling like, okay, it's coming. So I already know that, like the feeling of it.
Hmm.
If you let it go, you get a full panic attack, and who knows what can happen. I have never gotten there. So then I start giving myself therapy. Abigail, calm down. You are okay. This is irrational. You're coming out. And I can get a hold of it, and I'm like, okay, I can contain it and go back to being normal. But those few minutes that I had to control myself, they're so debilitating. I feel
Hmm.
so powerless that today I went to the doctor. She's a friend of mine. She's a primary physician. And I told her I need something because I want to go to Disney and not have to worry about that I'm going to sit down in a show that is going to close their doors. And I'm looking at where is the cast member? How can I get out? It's just ridiculous. It's exhausting. And I don't drink, I don't have nothing against medication. So please, people, don't take it personal. I just rather, I don't take medications for anything. I rather just, food or whatever. I've never had to. But there's a place for medication as well. And I told her, give me something as low dosage that I want to try it. I'm not saying, and I'm going to do therapy. I heard that cognitive behavioral therapy is good for it, or exposure therapy, which it freaks me out because I'm like, how you can expose me to that? Because I don't want to get stuck. But I'm going to go to a psychiatrist. I don't know. I'm in that realm. But the reason I'm bringing it here is because yesterday, somebody asked me a question that sunk in because I was doing my hair. I was, you get highlights and all of that, and I had to put foils. Well, on Sunday, I had that incident, right, that I told you in Disney. Then here's yesterday. I've done this service in my hair, I don't know for how many years. And it's always been fine. There was a moment when my hair was all full of the foils. She was in top, like in front of me. And I felt this foil here where the same thing again. I'm like, oh no, this is not, I can't live like this. It's becoming now things like it's so stupid because there's no another way to say it. Here I am. I'm like, can I please go to the bathroom? I didn't have to go to the bathroom, but I had to get up before I will go into it. And I didn't want her to know, because how you tell an stylist, like, hey, listen, I'm having a panic attack kind of feeling right now. I went to the bathroom, called my boyfriend. He's like, okay, babe, I feel like I'm like, but I'm getting better. So I'm talking to him, but it's really talking to myself. I go back, I sit down, and I get involved, but you don't understand the amount of intention that I had to be so like laser focused to get involved with the conversation with the girls. I'm like, so what do you do? And I pull through, and I pushed through. But I was tired. I was exhausted. I wanted to cry because I'm like, I can't, what's going on? It's been 2 days in a row. Is it because the day before I already had that in my mind and it's lingering and I'm really thinking about it? Because I was saying I have to deal with this problem. This is a mental situation that I need to get under control. With that said, I went to the doctor today in the morning. She gave me the prescription and I have it there. And I said, you know what? Maybe just having the medication with me, even if I don't take it, might help me and whatever this is, this phobia, just to know that I can take something to calm me down. She's playing what it does to me. That medication goes into the receptors that give that signal and produces whatever chemical that gets that rush, that anxiety attack kind of in my body. And it stops them from happening, right? So that I wanted to share that because I know that's also mental health. It's a different form. I don't know. I know it's claustrophobia, but it's becoming more pronounced in my everyday living, and it's scary. It is scary to deal with something like that. So I don't know if you knew anything about that, since I know you have dealt with so many things, certain people with trauma. So
thank you for sharing, Abigail. What you said made a lot of sense. It's, in my opinion, not stupid. I mean, however you feel when you describe it is valid, but it's, when it comes to mental health conditions, they're mental illness. So it's not supposed to make sense. It's, if it made sense and it was rational, then it wouldn't be a mental illness. It would be just okay. And so I definitely can relate to having certain thoughts that to some people it's like, why are you even, I don't even like to tell people what my intrusive thoughts are, because I often get like, why would you think that? Or like I'm saying, like, I know it doesn't sound right. I'm aware, but as objective and intelligent as we are, when it comes to these irrational thoughts, something else takes over where it's not about being objective. It's just that's how you feel and your brain is telling you it's real. And so I have done prolonged exposure therapy and I did find it helpful. It was definitely intense. So I wouldn't say, right off the bat, go for it. Definitely something to talk about with your therapist. I think it's amazing that you are going to start therapy, that you're open to different treatment options like medication. I personally do take medication. For a long time, I didn't. I was afraid that I would get a habit and like all my family. So I've been very intentional with what type of medication. Like, and this is, for anyone listening, talk to your doctor. Everyone's different. But for me, I don't want medications that have a history of habit forming
Mm-hmm.
or like super intense. But yeah, I'm definitely pro treatment, whatever that looks like for people. And I've done CBT as well. I can actually, so of course, I'm not a professional, so I'm not here to
Mm-hmm.
tell you, but a lot of what you said made sense. So even for me, I love roller coasters too. I've gone skydiving, bungee jumping, very similar, but when for a very long time, I couldn't go on roller coasters. And I didn't know why, because I like speed. I'm okay with heights. Like, what about this is bothering me? And so I probably realized when I was like 15, what was causing me anxiety was the lack of control. That's what it was. Oh, this is what is driving me, bananas is once you're locked in, you have no control. You have no control over the safety, over anything. You
Mm-hmm.
are in. And that is the part that I realized after years was driving me very off the wall. And I know after I did further, reflection is, well, when did that start? And for me, it started with the molestation. Like I mentioned earlier, that feeling of freezing, of being powerless, no control. And that, I guess subconsciously, my mind is like, oh, you're in that zone again, no control. And so I kind of, that's something to explore, is because that's like a common theme with the things you said. It's not about the hair salon or Disney World. It's about
Mm-hmm.
the lack of control. It's about, yeah, and that makes so much sense. I'm sure, I mean, you know your story, every detail. And so I would encourage you to reflect, with your therapist and explore like, what are some other times that I didn't feel like I had control? Because something about not feeling in control really is like a core wound that is just being activated. So,
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna look into that. Thank you. But the question that the stylist asked me was like, do you think it's because you stopped drinking alcohol that you're getting more now that what she said, now that you're not numbing or you're not using this substance, is it maybe the reason that you're getting this? Because I was talking about the Disney. I didn't say the episode on her salon, but I was talking about it because that's how I combated the situation at the moment. But when she said that, I said, I don't think it's that because I did use alcohol for airplane rides. Like if they were long, I would definitely drink. I'd be drinking at the bar. I don't care if it was at 11 o'clock. I would be drinking at 10 a.m. because I wanted to just not have that situation because the lack of control again. Once you get into that airplane, I am
mhm,
stuck in there till they decide to open that door. That's why I don't go
mhm,
all the way to the back of the airplanes. I have to pay extra. And it's not, well, why do you care? You're the same thing. I do care. My mind cares, you know? It's not like I'm trying to be, oh, because I want to be bougie and I want to go, like, I want to pay more money. No, I don't want to pay more money. But it gives me peace of mind that I'm the one getting off. When an airplane goes to the gate, you better believe that I'm being completely aware of when, let's get out now. And when they open that, I need to just be the first to go because if I'm all the way at the end, it just gives me that. So when she asked me that question, the way I brought it all, the way I wanted to talk about it here, because she did make me think like, is it because I'm not drinking and I'm not numbing anymore that side of me? Maybe I can go to Disney and start drinking, but I'm like, hello, that doesn't, can you believe for a second I don't have triggers anymore? But for
mhm,
a quick second, I thought, would that help me in that case? Should I drink like in the airplanes or and I'm like, I said the devil is a liar. Like literally I said that to myself. The devil is a liar. I don't need no damn alcohol to control my situation, whatever it is. Obviously it's a phobia and it's a mental situation that I need to deal with, but it's not the answer. My thing is that the answer is not alcohol. It will never be alcohol because then I remember the next day you might even feel worse because you get that anxiety anyways. So that's why I wanted to bring it up, the whole claustrophobic situation.
makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think that's definitely something to explore is a lot of things can happen when you stop drinking, if depending on what your experience has been, if someone has used alcohol every day for the last 20 years, then not having that, you're going to have kind of different things come up. And so I think it's great that you're being curious, that you're healing out loud, that you're sharing your story, you're talking to people, you're asking questions, and you're open to different perspectives. So whatever the answer is or whatever the source is, you're bound to figure it out because you're doing so much to figure it out.
I wanted to say it's hard to be vulnerable, especially in a platform like this. Like today, we really got into really deep conversations about yourself and myself, things that people don't know in my own family don't know. I said the reason I said to myself, just share it because you know what? Shame lives in darkness.
Hmm.
And no matter what, you still feel guilty or whatever it is. And
Hmm.
there's no guilt in my part. But we tend to feel vulnerable, or I'm gonna be judged, or I'm gonna be or a sense of people are gonna see me as a weak link.
Mm.
And I've always been very, you know me, I've always been very independent, strong oriented, like I'm go, go, go. And showing that it has never been part of my personality. Not that I don't think anything bad about it. It's just that for whatever reason, I saw that as, okay, maybe it's weakness. But that is a lie too, because you know what? That's part of my story, something that I went through. And I have to embrace my story in order to heal. And if I can help somebody else out there that might be feeling shame, they don't want to talk about it. I mean, you don't have to get into a podcast and tell the world, obviously, but talk about it with somebody because that's eating you alive inside.
That's beautiful, Abigail. I'm really proud of you. I know that feeling very well of what are people going to think of me? Are people going to weaponize it? Are people going to what like so many thoughts flood, but I will say that me sharing my story, whether it's one on one or on platforms, has been really healing. Because once you own your story, no one can take it and use it against you. You can't shame someone who is unashamed. You can't tell on me if I tell on myself and I dictate my story. And absolutely, what you experience, you are completely innocent. And I think for many girls and women, culturally, we're often told to not cause any issues, play small, be submissive. Growing up, I was often told by women, like, sit a certain way, don't dress like this, there's going to be men there. Like, it was always on us that we have to police ourselves. I never once heard anyone tell a man in the family, don't prey on little girls. And so it makes a lot of sense that when something happens, we blame ourselves because there's so much victim blaming. But truly, we don't owe our abusers anonymity. And like you said, we also don't have to tell the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's our story
Mm-hmm.
to do with it what we want to. But I think what you did was super courageous, and I'm really proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we are at the end of our episode, and I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's been very, very amazing. And just to know your story from the beginning to end, kind of. I know there's more, but just as a glimpse of it, we are all lucky, whoever is listening, because there was a lot of wisdom in it. So I want to really thank you for sharing your time. I know you're busy and you're an amazing coach. I've always said it. I've seen you in action. I mean, you basically did it with me right here, too, with my trauma situation. It is in your blood, honey. It is in your blood. That's why you're not a lawyer, even though you finished,
Yeah.
because you had a different calling. And when we had, that's just to say, by the way, I didn't touch on that, how brave you are. A lot of people, just because of status or just because what it represents, will do it. Even though they hate it, they will do it because of what it means and how they look. I think it takes such an like big amount of bravery just to say, you know what, I did it. Yes, it served its purpose. Yes, I'm sure you learned a lot and that will be helpful for you now, but that's not me. And owning who you are, that is something to be reckoned with, because Oh my God, how hard it is for us to just do that, to honor ourselves and say, I did that, but that's not what I want to do. What you're doing now is really being impactful. You're creating change. You're a cycle breaker, like it's your Instagram. They're beautiful names because they're the truth. And when you are being genuine and you're being authentic in an era where so many lies and people want to always show perfection, I think that we need more people like you and be a light of hope and say, you know what, let's call the BS. We all have the trauma, we all have our things, and help others in the same situation. So I wanted to thank you for that. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And what would you recommend, or what tip or that you can help somebody that might be in the journey of either starting, they're sober curious, or they're at the beginning and they're like, oh my God, this is hard, I can't do it? What would you tell them?
That's a great question. And I would take it back to the community. I would encourage that person to create their chosen family. So sometimes your biological family, just because you share DNA doesn't mean you share values, doesn't mean you're compatible, doesn't mean there's mutual respect. And so if you're not getting the compassion, the non-judgment that you're seeking within your household or your community, expand your community. We're in the age of social media, so there's apps, there's different pages, different groups that you can join and meet people that will actually give you the support that you're seeking so that you can be curious about yourself, that you can reflect and you can explore, what's going on. But I would say really curating your chosen family can really be life-saving.
Well, thank you, Priscilla, once again, to have
Thank you.
you. And
Thank you.
for anybody else that is listening, if you are a person that is struggling and you would like to have a one-on-one, it's a free discovery call just to see how it can help you. I will put my information in the show notes and just shoot me an email and we can go from there. No commitment or anything, just to see if I can help you in any way. And everyone, thank you so much for listening to another episode. And I see you guys in the next one. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.